So I spent the month of May participating in Punisher's Alternate Realities Render Challenge. Essentially, you are provided with a single animation rig of a guy pulling something, or maybe carrying something heavy, or really anything you can perceive this animation as. Without changing the animation, you are to create an environment and a character to go with said environment using only this animation. The end goal is to have a giant hours-long montage of everyone's submissions, with each and everyone cutting seamlessly to the next. So this is mine. In this video, I'm going to break down how I made it. First, I went to the drawing board and I drew some concept art. I do this with nearly every project, it's nothing new. My first idea was to use a model I already had beforehand. It's basically just this naked dude. I decided against it because it wasn't quite challenging nor impressive. As well, to hide his genitalia, I needed to have some kind of dark underlighting, which also hides details from the character and the environment. My second idea was to use a 2D shader and have this character. This character, like the previous one, were characters from past projects that have never seen the light of day. My third and final concept was to do myself. To rig a 3D model of myself. This would prove both challenging whilst also being an impressive feat, as making a 3D model of yourself isn't an easy thing to do. My first approach to making a 3D model of myself was using photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is the process of taking many photos and throwing them into a program that makes a 3D mesh of the object you photographed. Videogrammetry is the same process, except you use frames from your video instead of photos. However, after trying photogrammetry twice and with both attempts failing, I decided I needed to find another way. The issue with photogrammetry being the subject cannot be moving, so the parts of me that would move as I tried to hold still, like my arms, wouldn't be generated. Although I saw that with limited input photos, the environment around me captured really nicely. My next attempt was to manually sculpt a model to look like me. This also didn't work. 3D models are usually made with consideration to have the least amount of vertices and/or polygons. So if the face wasn't similar or designed for my face, it would look really janky. This problem was more noticeable in the jacket. With a finite amount of polygons arranged to limit surface area for what it was needed for that model, and that model only, it's hard to add details like creases in my bomber's jacket. Eventually, I found a research paper with a Google Collab tool called PyFood, which can generate a 3D model from a single photo and with good accuracy as well. So I tried it and I got a really good model. At the very least, a good model for my legs, torso, and arms, meaning I'd have to add better feet and hands. The face wasn't that bad either, albeit PyFood detected my hair as a hat, which wasn't really a bad thing, as I wear beanies often and could utilize that. So the face was good too, it just needed some touch-ups. Another amazing part from this was that the creases and wrinkles in my jacket on the mesh would correlate perfectly with what was seen in the texture. So I went through and I used the cloth brush to add some extra wrinkles and details to my clothing, my pants, jacket, and beanie. Then I used a Boolean modifier to cut off the hands and feet. I also cleaned up the messy vertices. I went through and textured the jacket, pants, and did some texture painting to make it look nice and accurate. I worked on sculpting the face just to make it look more like mine. As well, I added small details where needed. With texturing the head, I got lazy and simply projected a picture of the side of my head. I also used this application called Crazy Bump, which can look at a photograph and generate a normal map for it, as well as a specularity map, and even go so far as to remove highlights and shadows from the diffused texture. Of course, to avoid artifacts, I did properly unwrap UVs for the head and bake textures based off of the projection to the UV layout. I went back and did some texture paint to make the front side of my face look decent. Just enough so the camera would only see my face. Because it's projected from the side of my face and only that one side, if you turn the camera enough, the right side of my face looks very weird and distorted, which is perfectly fine to me, as the camera would only ever see the left side of my face. So anything wrong with the right side of my face was off camera. Not only that, even rendered at 4K, the model of myself takes a very small portion of the whole frame. So it's so small that you wouldn't be able to notice. Albeit, the face still looked good even rendered up close. I then added glasses, which was a single low poly plane shaped like my glasses with a silver or chrome-like material. I added hands from a model I had beforehand. I Frankenstein stitched the hands to the arms. I also morphed the hands to make them look more skinny like mine. I adjusted the model to line up with the skeleton. I rigged it, weight painted it, and I also added Vans shoes, as that's what I normally wear. I added some simple low poly cylinders for my calves. I Frankenstein stitched it to the body and weight painted it. That was week 1 for me. It's probably also important to mention at this point that I only had 3 weeks to work on this project, rather than the 4 I was given, because I started a week late. So at the end of the first week, I had a rigged, textured, animated model of myself that actually looked really good. I then went on to think about both what kind of environment I wanted to be in, and also what I would be hauling. I decided to look into past projects. I keep a portfolio with past projects and their project files. I have a lot of 3D projects that I've worked on, some of which never seen the light of day. The idea was to see what old projects, objects, scenes, and models I had made, regardless if they were used prior, and see if I could create something new using these former projects. I found a 3D model I made of my bedroom, which had a 3D model of my bed, closet, but most importantly, my desk. My desk has been used in the past in some of my work to represent my ambition, very sentimental. In almost every and any project I work on, there is an oblique or hidden story beneath it. That's what makes it art. I also thought it would be pretty neat if I were to be pulling my desk from an LED strip, as I do have an LED strip laid out underneath my desk. This would also serve as a nice, vibrant pink lighting to light up the back side of me. Like the desk, I also had a 3D model I made of my keyboard. I used a color ramp with a gradient of 2 colors, purple and red. I animated it by setting the position to the frame number. This is because my keyboard is actually set to light up like this. I did some rigid body simulations for the desk and keyboard. I also made an armature for the LEDs and did a cloth simulation. I linked one bone to the desk's location and rotation, and the other bone was linked to a bone on the model, or I guess the rig for the model. Another thing I was going to do is use Quixel's 3D scans, as shown here. However, even while correlating what level of detail to use, it was too performance heavy and didn't give me an environment. And that was week 2 for me. With 1 week left, I decided to focus on the setting, the environment I wanted to place myself in. I decided I wanted to make this render accurate and realistic to a specific place, rather than have a fictional world. I picked this curb nearby my house. It's a very sentimental location to me. Usually in the evening, night, or maybe extremely early in the morning, I'd stand on this curb and usually look to the stars or the sky while I reflected on current events. I know, very corny. To me, it's a place I would go to in my toughest moments, when issues arose about school or relationships, breakups, or really anything else. Anyways, I took a video going around and trying to get certain angles, perspectives, and details that I would later use for a photo scan. Now, I read online that while inputting photos for a photo scan, you shouldn't use more than 175. 175 would take roughly 4 hours on a good computer. So I inputted 7,000. And it took 5 days to finish. And I mean 5 days and nights. The photo scan was running day and night for 5 days in a row, for a total of 120 hours. So with the 3 days I had left, I spent the weekend cleaning up the mesh, reducing the polygon count to something much more manageable. unwrapping UVs, and splitting the mesh into 5 different parts and baking textures. I went back to Quixel and I got these models of broken concrete walls, some with rebar sticking out. The reason I decided to make the building destroyed rather than not destroyed is because while taking the video for the photo scan, if at any time I panned the camera up and toward the sky would create a glare. Also, I would be able to show more of the background. The bulk of the work at this point was done. After that, I just had to decide small details and preferences, whether I wanted depth of field or not, whether I wanted a depth of field with an f-stop of 1.0 or 3.3, whether I wanted the sky to be more pink or more blue, the lighting, the intensity of the emissions for the LEDs, that kind of shiz. I then made these low poly trees and this low poly building. I got some models of cars and put it all together. To animate the trees, I simply rotated them back and forth. I mean, it's so far away that you wouldn't be able to notice. I rendered out the foreground, middle ground, and background separately, then put them all together to make it easier on my PC. And that's it. It took me at most 3 weeks, as that is all the time I had. I definitely had a lot of fun with this project. If you want to check out the full montage with everyone's render, including mine, hopefully, the link for that will be in the description down below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. If you want to see more videos like these, let me know in the comments. I enjoyed making it and I definitely wouldn't mind doing it again in the future. I'm very adamant and ambitious toward these kind of projects. Lastly, for SCP fans, I have a really cool SCP video coming out real soon. I can't say exactly when it should come out, but it's definitely something really cool, so stay tuned for that.